Well, make sure which way it's pointing. Gotta get my wolf sitting up. Okay, hi guys. Sorry for being a couple minutes late. It's kind of a stormy day in Alabama. And I'll tell you right now, I may disappear all at once because of internet. The storms that came through a week ago damaged a bunch of lines, and they've been replacing the lines. And then today we had these big major storms roll over us. We've already got good evening, Will. Selma, Alabama, where my blood brother lives. He's a college professor up there, and he said they got tore up really, really bad up there. So it looks like a bomb zone. And so you'll hear run, 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 run in the background. He's sending me pictures that he took on the way home. So, yep, another day in Alabama. This is like March in Alabama. We expect this in March, but the last few years we've been having it quite a bit, and this time of the year as well. Good evening, Worm Wrangler, Neil, Frogmore, hello, Ronald, hello, Mopar, Barone, hello, Sunburn Bradley, hello, good evening, CJ, hello, Jerry Tyndall, good evening, Choctaw County. Oh, yeah. Yeah, storm fronts rolled over me now, but for about, well, the tornado sirens went off a little local to me. We had a small school in a little local area got hit. I understand all the kids are okay, but the school got hit. And just a line come through of just these long run tornadoes. And once one gets started, they just all start running. And it tense for a few minutes. Hello, D Hunter in Northwest Arkansas. Striker, hello to the mountains. Caesar Rivera, hello. Bears always, good evening. Bears in the house. Y'all say hey to Bear. I was talking to Chelsea Scott after our last, and she said, "You're missing all the good questions. Stop talking so much. Read the questions." I'm like, okay, I'll start reading more. You know, Jeff Alexander, hello. Trina, okay. Trina Green, hello. Edgar, good evening. Hook, hello there. Yeah, stormy night in Alabama. And I didn't even know if I was going to be able to do this, to be honest with you. Power kept going in and out. I am the end, literally the last house on a long, 40-mile long power line. And so, you know, the substation for me is like 22 miles that way. So there's a lot through them woods that something can go, and this small area, etc. And so I'm like the shore that the wave breaks on. Jim Stewart, hello there. Well, I will be going tomorrow morning. I'm bugging out of here at 5 a.m., heading to a private invitational over in Mississippi. At a friend is inviting a handful of people. There's going to be me and William and Pink and Homer Mayo and Donnie and maybe a few more. We shall see. And the reason it's an invitational is the area is small. You can't just say everybody show up and you have 200 people show up and you got an area that's got room for like 10. So it's just a small invitational thing. But now that this storm has crossed over, I'm kind of happy about it, because I was kind of concerned that it was going to stall out and we were going to be setting up and then have this roll over, which I'd been fine, but you know what I mean. You know, when you're trying to set up and get a camp going, and at the same time you have a storm rolling over the top of you, it can be a little bit of a pain. Yeah, Christmas tree lights, power grid. Well, actually, we've got a pretty good power grid. And my power rarely ever goes out. It's just in that last line of storms that came through last week, there was a lot of, I won't say small tornadoes, but you had just a lot of mainline winds. And it did a lot of tree damage in there, and that line got damaged. And they're coming through having to replace sections of it. And that's reason when I was on that live last Thursday or whatever with 11 Bang Bang, and suddenly I was gone for like 2 hours. where they were replacing a section. They just flipped it off, went on. So we just do what we can. Ryan, the storms came through. Yep. I have learned, if you will look, the storm fronts roll down, they hit Texas, they hit the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. They ain't going to push that out of the way. They slide sideways, and then they start going north at about Mobile. And that, if you drew a line from Mobile through Montgomery, that's the path of all the New England storms, where it sucks the moisture off the Gulf and it rolls up. It's just the jet streams what it's doing, but it's sucking all this moisture off that warm water of the Gulf, and it rolls it up here and hits a little bit of cool air, a little turbulence, and boom, you got tornadoes and heavy storms. So we're kind of used to it down here. Okay, ADK Mountains, hello. Jerry, about 3 inches of rain. That sounds about right. Hello, Justin. Good evening. Yep, it's Thursday. It was not that bad here. It was real intense. And you'd probably, I'd say, like maybe 2-3 inches per hour, but it only lasts 30 minutes. It's just a band going through. And the rest of the time it was drizzle and little bitty pieces. So usually it's not so bad where I'm at because it's just come off the Gulf. It's kind of organizing, and north of me is when it kind of organizes. It's when you see those big major storms, mainline tornadoes. Normally, if you drew a line about Montgomery, Alabama, about the middle of Alabama, from there north is where it really gets formed up, makes some big boomers. Hey, Gray Wolf. Oh, yeah. Rob of British Muzzleloaders. Good guy. I enjoy watching his stuff. See, you're up in Conyers. I got you. The Browning Pocket Hammerless. Yes, it is. That small, very sleek little pocket package. Yeah. Browning designed several very nice little small guns. I mean, I wish he'd be alive today. With the technology we got now, woo, mind he had, it'd be just, it was art what he was making, not just the fact that it was a functioning firearm, but it was art in many ways. Ryan, yeah, I'm going to be doing, I'm setting up the redneck camper, and I've got my canoe, and I'm going to be finishing up the redneck camper. I'm going to put some insulation on the inside of the roof. I'm going to repaint the roof, and I'm going to take my canoe and go down here to Geneva Lake and start doing some fishing trips down there. Just do overnight fishing trips to put some fish in the freezer. Time's about to get kind of lean, and it won't hurt to have some game and some fish in the freezer just in case. And that's something I can do easily in an afternoon. Just run down there and, go around the lake once or twice, get 10 or 12, 14, whatever it is. It pops up fish. Be a good way to do it, and then process put into the freezer. And so I got fishing on my mind. Normally it happens about middle of winter. I start thinking about fishing before it gets so hot, because everybody else thinks usually about fishing about March, April, May. By then it's already 92, 93 degrees down here in blazing sunlight, and it's just no fun for me to get out on a boat and you're sitting there and you're blistering. Yeah, I tan. I don't burn that bad, but it's just you're sitting there sweating trying to fish, and that's just no fun to me. Robbie, hello. Herbert, yeah. Well, hunker down. That line has been coming for 2 days, and it's just been that solid line. It's just past me. But what would have passed us, probably about 8 or 9 this morning, is right now be up in the Carolinas and like hitting your area. So I got friends up in that neck of the woods, and I'd warn them, that we had a bad front. You may want to, keep the kids home today because it can roll up there. CNR Arsenal, cool. Corn Pops Revenge. Love the name. Love the name. Oh yeah, Justin, being in there's a power plant down here in Florida that dumps their water into this creek, and it keeps that creek about 80 degrees year round. And so they had to go down there and put up chains and stuff where you'd come up out of the Gulf into bays and come up in there because fishermen wanted to come up in there because you'd have manatees, you'd have everything coming in that creek because that warm water discharge from that power plant is causing that creek to stay at about 80 degrees. Well, it's just clouds of fish down there. And so they made it where you can't get up in there for that very reason because of the discharge. And same thing, a lot of the dams. Guys get up very close to dams for huge catfish. Thank you, Bushcraft Basics. Hope you have a good night. Nick Hall, yeah. Up there with these bands, they'll come over them mountains. Mountains can tense them down, and they roll over and go into them valleys, and it just pours. Yeah, Hunter, it's supposed to drop down in the morning. It's supposed to be 29 here. It's 63 right now. It was 80 earlier. So we're going to have about a 30 to 30, 35 to 40 degree temperature drop between now and sun up. Corn Pot Revenge, exactly. Those power plants where they discharge water, yeah, great fishing. As long as it's nothing toxic, you know. But as long as it's just heating up water for a power plant, yeah, you're great. Hello, Tiny Titan, but you made it. How's things up in the Pacific Northwest? Thank you, Ryan. Simple Marmaduke. Favorite socks? Wool. Wool and wool blend. Usually, I will ghost around this time of the year, about January, around Walmart, around the hunting clothes. And a lot of times you'll find leftover wool hunting socks been marked down. And once the hunting clothing usually is clearanced out and gone, there'll be some show up in the men's department, and I'll load up. Plus that, and I'll go to military surplus like that, Kaufman's and Sampson, and I'll pick up the military issue wool blend socks, hiking socks, and warmth socks. That's my favorite for using down here. Wool socks don't deform bad. Even when they're sopping wet, they're still warm, and they don't just turn into goo and slide down your leg and the bottom of the boot. They got some form to them even when they're wet. And so that's a big advantage to me down here. Band. Okay. Good evening, Bear. Stay safe. Well, good, Tiny Titan. At least it ain't storming up there. But y'all had this came in what? Well, this is actually that wave that hit California, ain't it? Which is just the jet stream going straight into California. They're calling it a river of moisture, but what it is just a jet stream. Instead of going way up north and hitting Oregon and Washington, it's coming into California and hitting them mountains and dumping. So that's all that is. Corn pops, exactly. That's one of the reasons they block it off is let them manatees go in there and wet in winter. And you don't want to run a boat in there because they're so big and so slow. You'll just kill them or really hurt them by a prop on a boat. I know at one time they were talking about in certain parts of Florida of putting a cage. You had to have a cage on your props. But that was back in the 70s and 80s. I don't know if they even talk about that anymore, but they were trying to make it mandatory that you put a cage around the prop just to protect a lot of the big wildlife down there. Edgar, a trick that I learned with my wool socks once they start getting a little funky is I'll take and put baking soda, hot tap water, and like a couple of tablespoons of baking soda in it, make like a, half a gallon, and submerge the socks in it for half hour or so, and then just take them and throw them in the washing machine, let them do a normal wash, and that keeps a lot of that funky, from getting going. When you're working and you have to wear these socks all day, every day, they will eventually, especially in the summertime, get a little funky. And so that is a way to kind of neutralize it and keep from being so bad. Observation post Charlie, hello. Yes, Simple Man Duke, the Blackbirds are supposed to come in at the end of this month. This run started back in November, and it was supposed to be the end of January is whenever those should be coming in. So I'm expecting them in the next week and a half, 2 weeks at most. My goal is to ship them out by between now and the beginning of February. And when I contacted the maker about a week or so ago, he said we were still right on course. Sorry for the thumb, guys. Silky saw, cutting up firewood from a little wood stove, making small pieces, and I went to, and it chattered and jumped and hit me right in the end and just put me a nice, I got a rear sight notch now on the top of my thumbnail. So Silky Saw does a good job for that. But yes, there'll be more haversacks coming, and we'll probably be announcing a new run 1st of February on them. And I got in my my own personal Nighthawk. I finally got it in. It came in yesterday. So I'll be taking it to this camp out with me. So you'll get to start seeing videos of me using the Nighthawk. Finally got mine in. Gray Wolf, the Merlino wool socks, good wool, very little scratch to them. K Mountains, yes, that's the whole thing about California. They need that snowpack. Hopefully, this river of water they talked about should fill up a lot of them reservoirs and help with their water shortage problems. Maybe they won't be hollering so much about we need water for a while. It'd be nice. Ted Fisher, hello to Central Illinois. Gold Bond powder works good. Oh, Captain Crunch. Yeah, those Remington caps. I got a lucky deal. Back about a month or so ago, I had someone contact me that had 1,000 of them, of the number 10s, and said, I'm getting out. Would you like them? And I made a deal with them and got them. So I'm pretty stocked up right now on number 10s, which I'm pretty happy with, Hello, Mike Hall. How you doing? Sorry to hear about that, Mike. I really am sorry you lost them. Hope it gets better for you. Metal Reaper, hello to Canada. Mike Bolton, hello to Washington. I got you, Adirondack. Mm-hmm. You got to remember, being Southern, when I look at that, I know it's for Adirondack Mountains, but my mind wants to say Admac Mountain. No. So, just got to bear with me a little. Caesar, cornstarch does work. And let me tell you, for future, for the people in the summer and people in the winter, some people get them all the time. The best thing I have ever found for rashes and stuff like that of rubbing, where you're having to wear winter clothing or summer clothing or whatever, and you're getting rashes and rubs and stuff like that, Boudreaux's butt paste. It's for diaper rash. Best stuff I've ever seen. It's a little bit of a waxy to it. Now, also for you guys and ladies that have a real problem with poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, where you just walk by it and you break out, you can put a little bit on and put it like a barrier on you. A good friend of mine, they are very allergic to all of those. And it just seems like they just walk in the vicinity of it and it gets them. And so what we do is he takes an old army sock and drops a bar of soap down in it, ties a knot in it, and hooks it on his belt, puts a carabiner and hooks it to his belt, and he always carrying a canteen of water. And if he thinks he's just been exposed to poison oak, poison ivy, or whatever, dump it on the sock lather, because it's an oil. It's got to penetrate in your skin, right, to do the burning. And so he'll try to wash it off immediately. But that Boudreaux's, you can put it on and do it like a hand lotion or whatever, up and down your arms or whatever, and it acts as a barrier, and it keeps it from getting on you. Don't go to playing with it, but it will give you a better opportunity to keep from getting broke out. And I know some people are just badly allergic to that stuff. And so I always tell them, get Boudreaux's butt paste. It's in the baby section at your big mega stores, and it's for diaper rash. Great stuff. Hello, Terry. How's it going in the thumb of Michigan? Captain Crunch. Yeah. Independent thinker. Hello. Good job, Mike. 1,000 cats, $40. That's a good deal. Man, that's just so insane to me. I remember whenever 1,000 cats was $10. A 10 of cats was $1. There was something for like 105, 125, and then you'd get a whole, 1,000 for $10, 10 or $11. And now it's $100 and something when you can find them. Boudreaux's butt paste, invented in Louisiana. I can believe it. Observation post Charlie. Kaufman's military surplus, Sampson, Alabama. They've got all the web gear from about all the genres laying around. So canteen covers, packs, all the above, pouches, all of it. You can look them up online. It's Kaufman's with a K, military surplus, Sampson, Alabama. Just call down there and tell the ladies that I sent you to them, and tell them what kind of pouches you're hunting, and they will help you out and ship them to you. They're good ladies. They know their gear really well. They got all kinds of those packs. They got both some foreign surplus in there as well, like Belgian and stuff like that. German, not Nazi German, but German mixed in. So there's all kinds of stuff in there that they've got. So just ask what you're looking for, and I'm pretty sure they can help you out. Johnny Bravo, hello from Poland. Thanks for the thing about the Rumble account. I have a large video that I will be posting on Rumble on the survival shotgun, because it's things that I can't talk about on YouTube. And so I plan on putting that up on somewhere around the 1st of February. And I'll clue in everybody, and I'll take an edited version and put it on my YouTube channel. But I will be starting, I've already got it shot. I just got to go. When I looked at it the other day, it was an hour and 18 minutes. I got to get the time to get in there and edit all that down and put it out. But I will be putting stuff up on that account pretty soon. Oh boy, hey, thanks for dropping in. I have not had to buy, Justin, any 4-prong musket caps in a long time now. Barrett does. Barrett's got a couple of Civil War muskets, but I have not had to in quite a while. Mid-South Shooter Supply had caps at one point. That's where I bought some CCIs, and I believe they had musket caps. So Mid-South Shooter Supply. Take a look at them. I don't know, but be my first look if I was looking. Tennessee Smoky, welcome in. Awesome, got your power back. Oh, the pouch that I have, my multi-pouch. That was being made by my good friend Dan, and Dan passed away. And I've still got a couple of them. They're not complete. Got to put the snaps on them. And I will probably do that in a future, not terrible long. I'll get off my lazy tail and go put the snaps on them. I think I got like 8 or 9 left. And those were being made by my wife and me for Dan. They originally were being made by Campcraft. And then me and Hope went to making them for Dan so Dan could have a little extra income. And so after Dan passed away, we kind of got away from it. But those that I've got, I'll put out and let everybody know about. I'm going to give me till next month, guys. I got so much on my plate right now. It's just ridiculous. Corn Park, they did have good gear. And you look at a lot of the gear that we started doing, the helmets and stuff, years and years later, we're in many ways copying a lot of their gear. I mean, you got to like them, but they had good gear. Benton, the black powder barrels for the Thompson Center Contender, I have seen them, but I have not fired them. I played around with the Thompson Center Contender in the late 70s, early 80s. And where I had a 30-30 barrel, I had a 44 Magnum barrel, and a couple of others, but I never got a black powder barrel for it because I'm more of a traditionalist. I like flintlocks and things like that. But I do know that they actually were very accurate, because I know people that shot them in competition. So that's about all I can tell you. Sorry. Wayne Wiley. The weather's now getting to us in Fitzgerald, Georgia. Hang in there. It's pretty intense for a couple of minutes. You're going to have a little buffeting of intense and light and intense and light. And then if one of them mainline big boys hits, it's just going to be like it's pouring out of a bucket and just boom, 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 thunder for like 25, 30, 40 minutes. And then it'll pass over and you go back to that broken. So it's not, the front line is not very thick, but it is pretty intense in the middle of it. Scott Myers, just show up at my event in the spring. Come on down and camp. I always put out like a week before or a couple days before, I'll put up a drive-in video showing where you come off the highway, get on the dirt road, roll down to the place, etc., so that you can see exactly how to get into the lake. Turn off the main road, it's 4 miles on a dirt road down to the lake. And a lot of people will try to put in their GPS, and that's a hit or miss. I've had people that brought them straight to the lake, and I've had people put it in, and it put them on the back side of the lake at a food plot 2 miles from us. So it's kind of hit or miss. So I always tell everybody, look at the video, because you're probably coming through that forest and it drops down elevation. You're probably going to lose signal. And so don't think I'll just watch it as I'm driving in, because you'll come down the ridge and you ain't got no signal. Look at it and understand that there'll be only one turn. Once you turn off the highway and get on the dirt road, you're going to have a lot of roads coming in and out. Ignore them until you hit this place, and it'll be a pointer up there and go up the hill and boop, 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 and there's the lake. So, but it'll be self-explanatory when you see the video. Will my Blackbird pouch work? It should. You can probably hook it on there pretty easy. Oh, percussion revolver series. I do them at the beginning of the month, and BT online sign up at yahoo.com. Now, let me make it a little easier. If you've got Facebook, just holler at me on Facebook and I'll send you the link. Okay, so you can go for the percussion revolver classes. No, you don't use boar butter to cook with. Boar butter is uses main component is a version of beeswax, and when it came out, it was very innovative for its time. But there are better choices today, and that's stuff I've been working with Lita to develop, where we got gun butter now, and we're the only. I like boar butter. I use boar butter for 20 years, guys. It's good stuff, but once it gets below 40 degrees, it's hard as a rock. You can't squeeze it out of the tube. You can't get it out to do stuff. It acts more like cheese than it acts like a lubricant at that point. And the stuff that we developed, which is gun butter, we've had feedback now from somebody during that recent cold spell where he had left it out in his truck and said it was 25 below for 3 days and it's still soft and pliable. It hasn't got hard at all. So that's one of the reasons I like using it. When I went out and did the video and it was 20 something degrees and I was shooting, it was just as soft and pliable as it could be. And that's, to me, that's the big advantage of it. It does not just turn liquid at 100 degrees. It's still kind of greasy, but it's not, you couldn't pour it out. On the other hand, at cold temperatures, it doesn't turn to a rock. And I've tried lubing bullets with boar butter and stuff, and then it'd get really, really cold, and you'd go to load a conical or something, and the lube just fall off of it, flake off of it. This won't. It'll stay soft. Hiram, sure, bring him. We got no problem with dogs as long as you, of course, have an animal you can control and so camp a little bit away so that you can take him back to your camp and he's not going to bark all night. That's the only thing. Other than that, bring them. I love doggies. As long as they got good manners around people, I'm happy. Twin Arrows, hello. Yeah, Chris, a huntsman would be nice. It really would. And the contenders, to be honest with you, they still make them. I knew guys that had, at one point, there was like 30 or 40 barrels you could get for a Thompson Center contender. And I knew a guy that was trying to collect them all. I remember he had a 45-70. That was a handful. I'm here to tell you that was a handful when he touched that sucker off. So. Independent thinker, those Lyman Great Plains rifles are good guns. I had one for many years, and they're good guns. There were 2 barrels. The one that had the one in 66 was the round ball barrel, and the one in 48, I think it was the one for conicals. And that's when conicals were really coming into their own in muzzleloading. At that time, you're seeing the shift from guys shooting traditional looking muzzleloaders more into what would become the inlines of today. That was the break of it. And there were a couple of companies, and the Lyman was one of them, that came out. And if I remember right, it was the Lyman Great Plains, and then there was the Hunter Great Plains. And the Hunter was the one that had the faster rifle, and it shot the bullets. It didn't shoot the round ball very well. I had the one that was one in 66 because I was shooting in competition and you could only use round ball. So no, boar butter's not for eggs. Cool, Mike Bolton. I was a shooting sports director for the Boy Scouts back in the 90s and did a lot of shooting and stuff with the kids. Well, Captain Crunch, the product I got works good. Lita Green at Handmade Like I said, send me a thing on Facebook and I'll send you the link to it. That's called gun butter. And it's something we brought out for the same reason that you said. This a tub, which is 4 ounces, I think it is. It's $15 or so for a tub of it, and it lasts a long time. I've got like a quarter left in mine, and I've been using mine for nearly a year for all my cap and balls and my muzzleloading rifles and shotguns. So it lasts. It does good. Pull boy, they do have some, but I don't know if they're original M65s or if they're modern reproductions. Trying to find an original M65, you're just going to have to look at eBay or something like that. Most of the reproductions, it's kind of hit or miss. I've seen some that look fantastic. All the seams are perfect, everything else. And then I've seen several that it just looks like somebody half drunk sewed it. So you just gotta, what I recommend is if you're going to get a modern reproduction, make sure it's someplace you can return it if it ain't right. Get it, look through it, turn it inside out, look at all the seams, make sure everything's put together good. If it is, great, wear it. If not, send it back to them, tell them there's a problem, etc. That'd be my recommendation. Johnny Bravo, no, I really don't. As far as what's going on over there, I kind of follow some of that stuff, but a lot of it is, like somebody pointed out, Russia never backs out of a war until they've had at least 500,000 dead. So, what was it the guy said? Poorly trained, low morale, not wanting to be here. We have a technical term for that. It's called Russian army. But they just keep throwing people at them until they win. So we shall see what will happen over there. Hiram, those inline 50s can be very good rifles. And for people that aren't really interested in the history, they just want to be able to shoot in the muzzleloading seasons, inlines are great. I mean, it still looks like a conventional rifle. It functions like your conventional Remington or whatever. So you've got a lot of the same, muscle memory and etc. And I think it's a very good idea. And I know several good friends of mine that hunt with them, The old, Justin, did I ever use the old Lyman Ideal hand loads like the 310? Yes, I had a 310 and 38 special. The old, Ideal hand loaders it's just one step removed from what they had in the old West, and had the 38 special dies on it. And I reloaded with that for probably 2-3 years till I got into a Lee reloading press and traded it off to somebody that wanted it bad to go in a case set. Corn pops, have you ever messed around with Breech loading cap and ball revolvers? Not that I recall. And there were such things. I seem to recall back in the early 80s, you know how a Smith carbine breaks open like a shotgun does. And the Queen Anne, I definitely did shoot several times Queen Anne. A Queen Anne, the barrel unscrews, and you drop the ball in the hole, and it would go down and stop against the rifling. Then you filled it full of powder and then screwed the two halves back together. So it was a breech loading breech loading black powder handgun. And no ramrod was needed. Just drop the ball in, fill the chamber full of powder, and screw the thing in and cock it and prime it. It was a flint. It was a Queen Anne revolver. Al Seward had one, and I shot probably 30, 40, 50 times one. It's a rather novel idea, but that was about it. Worm Wrangler. Yeah, eggs are up. And everybody used to laugh at people wanting to keep chickens. Ain't that amazing? Me and Bear talked about how, we started last year about this time when we started doing the old ways, saying now's a good time to start putting stuff up. And we had several of our friends laugh at us. Oh, that ain't never going to happen. Really, eggs is $5 a dozen now. Used to be 75 cents a dozen. Yeah, and we're just starting this year, so got to get. I'm saying I'm going fishing. I'm gonna put some stuff in the freezer. Me and Bear planning the last of this month. Me getting and doing some. We're gonna do some serious hunting together, deer and hog, and I'm gonna be taking Daniel, which is my 50 caliber mountain rifle, out, and a couple other guns, and we're gonna go out and see if we can get some stuff put into the freezer. Well, I understand. I've been out to Utah. It's pretty country, but yeah, I know what you mean. Andrew, I have they're okay, decent rifles. That's about all I can say. I would not pick one for myself, but they're okay. Walmart usually goes for the lowest bidder. Now, it's a decent piece of gear. It's 50 caliber inline or whatever. I have heard nobody come back and give me some big negative report on it. But usually Walmart's just plugging in a niche. And so I would recommend looking around and seeing what's available. A lot of times a CVA, Ultima, or something like that. You can look for guns after tax time. So let's say May is when you want to start looking around the pawn shops for inlines and stuff, because that's where the guy got money and bought what he really wanted. And a lot of these guns will show up onto the surplus, at gun shops, pawn shops, stuff like that. And you can pick up a better gun for a comparable price. See? And so that's what I recommend for most people to do. Corn pipes. Exactly true. They just keep throwing people to wear you down. Hello, Snapper. Good evening. Yeah, Mike Bolton, the Roscoe M65 jackets, like I said, most time they seem to be fairly decent, but again, look it over real good and see if you can return it. Sportsman's Guide, quite often they'll have the liners, and the surplus place in Sampson may have liners. I've seen quite a few there over the past, but again, it's one of them things you got to hit. And my video that will be popping up this Sunday while I'm out camping is showing using the M65 as a sleep system. Passing on some tricks. I remake the pillow to show you the pillow again, and I'll show you a few tricks of doing with the liner and stuff like that to be able to sleep and utilize it as a sleep system when you ain't got nothing else. So. Mike Bolton, 209 primers through roof. Yes, they are. I had a good friend of mine that he had, if I might even have it handy. Just a second. He had 100-round box of 12 gauge that his son had bought and cut it open to get the shot out of because he couldn't find lead. So he just bought shotgun shells, cut the top off, and poured the lead out to make it into lead figurines that had moles. And so he was going to throw it away. I'm like, whoa, what you doing with that? And he said, I'm just going to pitch that. No, give it to me because it had live 209 primers, and I can pop them puppies out. And so a wad powder, I'm not going to reuse the powder, but a wad and those 209s, yeah, those, we don't throw those away. Give me those. And so I'm going to have enough 209s to last me a little bit. I got 100 of them, whether I wanted to or not. Snapper, the Queen Anne, the one that Squire had was the actually had rifling. And I want to say it was Pieta that came out with it. I may be wrong. But you would unscrew it, and when you look down, it actually had rifling. And you just drop the round ball in it and go thunk and stop. Fill it up, screw it on, good to go. And it did just fine. It actually shot better than I expected. Remember the Charleville French pistol that looks similar but is not a take apart? It is a muzzleloader. It's larger. And it's a French, I think it is, I want to say it's the 77 or whatever French pistol that looks like you took a Queen Anne and kind of scaled it up. You couldn't hit the inside of a barn with that thing. We tried everything. And it was, a TARDIS technology. You pull the trigger and it went where it wanted to, It did not ever seem to have a rhyme or reason to it. And that Queen Anne actually did, because the bore was slightly smaller than the bullet. And so the round ball, being the bullet, would have to swedge in and grip it. And it actually improved accuracy quite a bit. I'm surprised that didn't take off and go further. Why it didn't. I can see a blunderbuss would have been awesome with something like that, where I could just, like a half interrupted thread, open it up, dump, stick a paper cartridge in it, break it off, slap it back together, cock it, be fast reload. But it just, one of them good ideas that just never took off. Yeah, Gray Wolf, exactly. They don't want you to have a propane stove anymore either. I heard about that, because they don't want you to be buying natural gas and stuff. So, besides, you can't turn off with flicking a switch. Gator eggs. No, you don't mess with no gator eggs. Mama gets real upset if you get anywhere near her babies. Alan Rice, yeah, that's it. The M65 field jackets. It's shocking how much them things are on eBay. I saw one not long ago. Somebody was asking me, and I went looking on eBay, and there's one like $165. It was still in the wrap where it had been issued to this guy's dad, and he never wore it. So yeah, for putting into a kit for historic reenactment, yeah, I can see that. But as far as to me, they were always, when I was coming up in high school, they were the $10 jackets, because everybody had been to Vietnam, everybody had whatever, and these were being just dumped in surplus everywhere. And that's dried up. And so you're just going to have to really look to stumble upon one. Cherokee Twilight. You're still getting bass and brim. Our fish do not truly go dormant. They'll get a little finicky and they get a little slow, but they're also getting a little fat right now. And so I kind of like to go out looking for bass on the days where it warms up to like 65 to 70, get in the shallows. You'll have bass and brim. Now we're right on the edge of what we call the sucker run, and it's a type of fish. It's an ocean-going fish that comes into our lakes and rivers, comes up our rivers and creeks to spawn. And it's a bottom feeder. It's got a nose that goes down on the front of it. And we call them sucker fish, red horse and sucker fish. And we go out and we fish for them where you're using a long shaft hook, and you put yellow kernel corn on it, whole kernel corn that right out of the can like we eat it, and just put like 5 or 6 on it and throw it out there with a big weight to hold it on bottom and catch them. And the fish are really good tasting. However, they are a nightmare of bones. And so we would fillet them and take as many of the bones out as we could, and then we'd run them through a food chopper and make fish cakes out of them, like you make salmon cakes or etc., and fry them that way. That way you just chop it up real fine. The bones are hair fine, and once you chop them up, it's like gristle. It isn't something like sticks you like a needle. It just becomes like you don't even notice it's there when you chew it, as long as you chop it up fine. So those are starting in January and will run through the end of February. But bass, brim, Cat never go out down here. Thank you, Noah. Stephen Ladrine, good evening. Jacob, good to know. Hope you're doing well. Andrew, did they ever make a black powder sniper rifle? Yes, they did. The Whitworth. Whitworth came out of England and it had a hexagonal bore, and it was a 4.51 hexagonal bullet. And those guns have been shot at to 1,000 yards. They're not kidding. In fact, they're banned in many competitions because they are so accurate. Properly done. If you go back and look at the Creedmoor match of the 1870s, that was the famous long range match out to 1,000 yards, and the British team, the European team, I think it was British, but it was a European team, were using muzzleloaders, and the American team were using sharps and that type guns. And their scores at 1,000 yards, snipers today will tell you they would be hard pressed to match those scores. And they were doing them with iron sights at 1,000 yards. So yeah, you can get a muzzleloader that'll reach out that far and do that kind of work. And the Whitworth, but I'm here to tell you, you're gonna pay $2,500 for it. You see the Pertasoli, I think, makes them, and you got Mike Bellevue did a good video series not long ago talking about the Whitworth, and you got to get the mold that matches the gun, because you don't just put a round ball down that hexagonal bore. And Ross Seyfried, years ago, who had been a national handgunning champion, was known for his long range shooting, did a wonderful article in Rifle Magazine talking about just offhand hitting Coke cans at 200 yards with his, that it was phenomenally accurate. So yeah, they did make black powder sniping rifles, but if you get a modern one, they're going to be just as expensive as a real one, because they know what they got. Good evening, Trapper Dan. Good to see you. Grey Wolf, I hear you. You get rid of the stuff. They want it all gone. Justin, do I use a fishtail parka? No, but Mrs. Blackie does. Years ago, I gave her a M65, and she didn't care for it. It was too short for her. And then I found a Korean issue fishtail, model 51 fishtail parka with the 2 liners in it. That's still her severe weather coat. It hangs up in the closet right by the front door. And if it's going to be super cold and bitter, she's going to be wearing that fishtail parka. I've offered to buy her a better coat. I don't know how many times, but for 20 years, that's been her favorite winter coat, is that fishtail parka. Don Ross, good evening. Gray Wolf, gigging for whitefish. We used to do that at night for cats. We'd take lights in a boat and move along real slow in the shallows of the ponds and lakes, and use a frog gig and go for cats, because you'd have a big old cat, a cat, sitting there in the shallow, and you just ease up on them, have just enough light to be able to see into the water. We'd actually put the lights under the boat as opposed to up on top, so you didn't get the reflection of the surface you saw under the water. And we would do that to gig cats and stuff. Hello, Ryan. Frank Sanders, hello. Jacob, oh yeah, the Mason-Dixon line up there at the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. Yes, independent thinker. Captain did do a video with Whitworth. Captain has got a very fine channel. I've talked to him a couple times in the past, email back and forth and stuff like that. He's a very good guy, very knowledgeable. I haven't seen the Mag 30 Gray Wolf, but one of the advantages to muzzleloaders and black powder, okay, if you get good clean powder that is not a bunch of dust in it. So this is, let's say, 3F, and it's not 3F with a bunch of superfine 5F dust mixed in. It's 3F. You get very consistent pressures from a given load. And if you do all of your stuff being very precise to get it loaded out, your shot to shot variation can be very, very small. And that equals very small groups at very long range. To give you an example, when I used to compete out to 500 and 1,000 with a 30-06, if you were off the thickness of a piece of writing paper, that thick, if you were off that much at 800 yards, you were 24 inches off your target because of it spreads the further out you go. So you had to be exactly dead on, because if you were off by that much, that was a 24-inch different impact from where you started, whether you were off high, low, whatever. And muzzleloaders, since smokeless powder is preferred thing today for lots of reasons, but a lot of the powders, when you look at the shot-to-shot variation, this one was 300 psi, and then this one was 310, and this one was 312, and this was 318, and this was 296, and you average all that up and you get the shot-to-shot variation of 24 psi or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Well, by doing that, each time you get that variation, it's going to go to a different point of impact. And black powder, properly done, can outperform smokeless. Now, you're going to have smokeless that can outperform it easily, okay? But the average black powder versus the average, it can be done. And that's what you're doing. You're getting that shot-to-shot variation down smaller and smaller and smaller. One of the guys that I was shooting with one time, that was shooting the Whitworth out to 800 yards, and his shot-to-shot variation was under 10 feet per second difference from shot to shot. Well, he had beautifully small groups way out there. And then you'd have somebody come up, they would have a M14 or whatever rifle, and they're not using completely custom ammunition in it, and their variation shot to shot was 30 or 40 feet per second, because the ammo they're shooting is not that dialed in, you see. So their groups were a lot bigger because of that being off by just a itty bitty bit of that pressure, a little higher, a little lower, whatever causes your bigger group. And so he'd dial that black powder gun in seriously. He was taking a super fine mesh screens and was pouring his black powder out on it and then sifting it to get all the dust out of it, and end up with just the whole kernels, and that's what he loaded with. I mean, guy was anal to an unbelievable degree of every nitpicking little detail, but he had awesome groups out there. You could not argue that. So that was what he wanted. See how tiny points you can get to. Tennessee Smoky, I am tentatively thinking about it. I'm going to the Georgia Bushcraft this time. I am thinking about it. I've got this event I'm going to right now. I am planning on going to the Southeast Bushcraft Base Camp, Frozen Foot, in 1st February. And then I've got my event that I'm putting on in March. And then we'll just see about, I talked to Roger, and we may go to Georgia together. I know a lot of the guys are planning on going to that, so I'm going to try to go to it, See how tax season goes too. You know how it is. Judo 77422. Hello there. Claymore, hello to Australia. Good evening. You're on the other side. Oh, I got you. On the road hitchhiking home. Well, good luck to you, Claymore Steel. Oh, wait. Gray Wolf. Yeah, I think I have seen. I don't remember the channel, but I think he saw the guy laying down. He's on a high out in the wide open somewhere, desert or something, and he's shooting to like the far side of a valley. Him and a woman doing it, if I'm remembering the right one. But I've seen him shoot too ridiculous, and you can do it. You know, the gun is capable of throwing it that far, and the bullet will hit something out there. It's all appear in the Mark I computer to do all your calculations of wind, barometric pressure, gravity. Is there other variants? Headwind, quarter wind, whatever. When I shot on my last 1,000-yard competition, they had called the match before we started because we had such a crosswind. And it was coming in at 5 o'clock and going out at 11 o'clock. And they told me, if you want to shoot, it'll count toward your overall standing, but we're not going to hold it because it varied anywhere from 10 to 25 mile an hour wind. It was just gusty. And so nobody wanted to shoot. And so me and my guy got up there and shot. And due to that wind, I was on number 3, but I was aiming at number 7. You know, I think that's right. Yeah, I was aiming at number 7 to get the bullet to curve and hit my target because it was going to drift so far to the left. No fun, but you know, you're going to hit something. Calculate it out. You can hit something good. Tiny Titan, good evening. Thank you for coming in. Captain Crunch, the 30-06 is one of the finest calibers ever made. And you can make a really good man cave argument that nothing since the 30-06 creation in that category of hunting cartridge has surpassed it. You know, like the 300 Winchester Magnum is a hot loaded 30-06. The 308 is a downloaded the 308 is a downloaded 30-06. The 300 Savage, the blah 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 blah. Could you make a 30-06 do it? Yeah, I can load it up, load it down, and look at all them bullets that are available. It's one of the most versatile cartridges. And I had an 03A3 Springfield, and I loved that gun. You know, just loved it. It had a late war rebarrel, so it was a virtually new barrel when I got it. And that I cut my teeth on 30-06. You know, it'd take anything in North America with the right bullet and right placement. It'll take anything. And if I had my feet to the fire and you told me I could only pick one deer caliber or one hunting caliber to use on anything in North America, it's going to be an argument in my head between a 45-70 and a 30-06. And the only reason I'm going to be arguing with that 45-70 is you're also including, you know, big game like grizzly and stuff. You see anything in North America. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be 30-06 is going to win. It's going to be an argument now, but it's good caliber. And the 6.5 by 5.5 and the Creedmoor and all of those, they can be just as good a calibers in the proper hands and proper use. 6.5 is good as it don't kick quite as much, and that extremely long bullet is very stable in flight, so it'd be very good for long range. I still like a 30-06 just because I can get ammo anywhere. I'm always a little bit leery when people, this new caliber's come out and you need to get it and try it out. And I did that a lot. And then 5-6 years later, you go like, remember when the 7mm Odd 8 came out? Man, it was the darling. Everybody had to have one. Bullets was everywhere. Now find ammo for it. How about the 300 short mag, 243 short mag, 270 short mag? Got a hand load. You know, for several years, man, it was the thing. Now, good luck finding ammo. And a lot of times you go into the pawn shops, like I was talking about in the spring, man, here's all these, at least down in my area, 240 short mag, 270 short mag, 30 cal short mag. It's because a box of ammo is like 60 or 70 bucks. They want $250 for the rifle. Buy 3 boxes or 4 boxes of ammo, you can buy the rifle again. If you're not a hand loader, yeah, you real quick realize I can get a 30-06 and get cheap $12, $14 box ammo and be able to shoot. So it's one of them things. Gary Thorsell, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Mike Bolton, I'm part of a shooting club right now that we have access to the CMP, which is at Anniston, Alabama, about 4 or 5 hours north of me, Redstone Arsenal. And where you can go in there and pick out your M1 Garand. And I have not had an M1 Garand. And I've got access where I could put in my paperwork right now if I wanted to pay and get me an M1 Garand. And I had been thinking real hard. In fact, Bear's got an M1 Garand. And I told him back, I think in November, I'd like to take out and shoot your M1 Garand a little and play with it a little bit and see if I want to go ahead and get me one. Because I'm not going to be able to find an 03A3 Springfield that easy anymore. Them things got pricey. But I'd like to go hunt with a Garand. It'd be a lot of fun in a deer stand early in the morning. Captain Crunch, I have shot a Barrett. When the Barrett was being developed and being offered to the military, one beginning to be offered to a lot of the special forces groups and stuff like that. One of the civilian shooters that was working with that project was a friend of mine who did living history with me. And we were in Montgomery, Alabama at a living history event at Fort Toulouse. Well, just up the road, literally within earshot, is a state trooper shooting range for the state. And you'd hear gunfire. They get up over their MP5s and etc. And Richard came up and said, I want to show you something. Let's take a little ride. And we rode up there. And they had a Barnett 50 that was just coming out. It wasn't something that was being seen out, but he was a shooter for it, and he was demonstrating it to the Alabama State Troopers. He was the shooter that was going to be actually firing it for them. That to give them the idea, because I was thinking like for a barricade gun where you had somebody in a vehicle, you need to disable this vehicle. That the state was thinking about buying like 2 or 3 of them for that type of thing. You got somebody that had armored up a bulldozer or something. You needed something that could penetrate. And so they didn't want a bunch of them, but the state was considering getting a couple just to have an inventory for such emergency type deal, something extreme like that. And they'd even had a couple of drug things where they had armored up an 18-wheeler around the engine compartment and etc. To run dope and stuff, and they had encountered that, and it had been a very difficult stop. So they wanted something that could disable a large vehicle, and so Barnett 50 would. And so I got to shoot a Barnett 50. I think I put like 8 or 9 rounds through it. It's impressive, kick like a double barrel, 3.5-inch 12 gauge, but it was not as bad as you'd think it would be. I mean, but you got to understand, I was not that big a guy either. and laying prone behind that thing, I'd pull the trigger and it'd slide me back 2 inches. You know, and I shoot big guns, so it was impressive. I have the BAR Browning Auto Rifle and 30-06. I have shot one of those quite a bit. Those are fun, you know. Yeah, Gray Wolf, up there where you're at, you can use whatever just fits the purpose, you know. But remember what old Elmer Keith said: use enough gun. I had a GI down here that he toted a 6-inch 44 Magnum that he'd got out of the Smith & Wesson custom shop, and it had a ghost ring sight on it. It had like a lollipop front sight and then a big old ghost ring rear sight, and had a special holster made up to hold it. And I remember being at the POV range, and he was out there shooting it. And somebody was saying, "Why would you want such thing?" He said, "Because he liked to fish, and he went into by bush plane into places in Alaska where, you know, they're going to drop you off and pick you up in 3 days, and you're it." And he said, when you turn around, you bring a 12 gauge, of course, to handle bear, but you know, you're sitting there on the stream with the fly rod working it, and suddenly you hear something and turn around and you're 30 yards from a big one looking at you. He said, I wanted a cannon on my hip. And so where you're at, use enough gun. Edgar, yeah, with enough welding experience and enough, nothing's impossible given enough time and resources. Well, now, I was asked not long ago that about hunting. If I was going to be starting out, you know, life's got a little difficult, and if they were going to pick one gun to start out with to try to learn to start putting some meat in the freezer and stuff like that, I said absolutely get a shotgun. Now you're probably going to be best off to get a 12 gauge, although I'm a big fan of the 20. But 12 gauge has a lot more variety of shells available, and you can normally find a bigger variety. And with the 12 gauge, you can take just about anything. The only limitation is range. If you get a pump and either a 870 or a 500, I'm not that big a fan of automatic 12 gauges. I know that's going to be sacrilege to a lot of you, and they can be great guns. And I think I even right now own a semi-automatic 12 gauge, but they're kind of sensitive to the power. And so you can't just put any shell in it. It may not have enough oomph to cause it to cycle. Whereas a pump, you're the one doing the cycling. And so you can shoot the weakest shells all the way up to the heavy hammers. And 12 gauge, be the rifles. If you're going to be thick brush, something around the 30-06 power is going to handle anything. But don't discount, again, if you're in thick brush, don't discount the handgun calibers. A 44 Magnum out of a rifle is impressive out to 100 yards, how well it can harvest game. Same thing, the 45 Colt is impressive in what it can harvest game out to about 100 yards. You know, and if, like I've showed in my videos, most of the time I'm looking at 25 yards. You can't see a deer beyond 25 yards because it's so thick. So if you get a shot, it's close, in which case a shotgun or one of these work. And the advantage of having a handgun and a carbine that work with the same ammunition is just as viable today as it was in the old West. And so I can be able to have handgun ammunition for hunting and defense. I can also have a rifle that uses the same ammunition for hunting and defense. So one powder, one thing, etc. And then a shotgun, which I can then dial in for whatever job I need. The arsenal would best be a handgun, rifle, and the same caliber, and a shotgun. Those three, that little arsenal, you can handle just about any of your hunting needs in the eastern woodlands. Now, you guys out west or up in the big country where you got really big animal like moose, you need to vary that. It may be something more potent like a 30-06, a 300, or whatever, 44 Magnums. You just got to be realistic about what you're facing and what your target's going to be and what you're going to encounter, and get enough gun, like Elmer Key said, to handle it and be something you can easily get your shells and reproduce shells by yourself, reload. Gray Wolf, exactly. The 45 Colt flat point. The flat point is a better hitter. Okay. We like conical bullets for its aerodynamic flight and rifles because it gives long range accuracy. If long range accuracy is not the factor, i.e., I'm toting the gun I'm expecting to use within 100 yards, flat point, baby, I want it to smack. Instead of trying to cut in, I want it to hit blunt and just tear the biggest, flattest hole possible. And you look at a lot of them guys that, you read the rifle magazines and, oh, this guy's got the new whiz bang, whatever, and we're in Alaska hunting, and you look past him, and the guide is normally got a lever action in something like a 45-70 or a 30-30 or something like that. That guy hunts for a living on big bears or whatever, and he's choosing to bring something a big flat end bullet because he knows it'll anchor. Yeah, you shoot it with that 30-06, that 7mm Magnum, 6.5, whatever. Great long range accuracy, but if you want something to hit it and hit it hard, flat nose is the way to go. I used to flat nose my 22s. I forget. I think it was like a 3mm deep well socket when I was a kid that we ground off to where you'd drop a 22 long rifle in it and set it on a flat surface, and just the tip of it would stick up. And we'd take a file and flatten it off. Well, today you can buy that ammo. It's called Punch, where it's a flat point 22. It is radically more effective on small game. It really is, because that little flat end on impact, it just dumps all kinetic energy, where even that little round nose tries to penetrate. And so I was taught by a lot of old guys that spent a lot of time out there doing stuff. And they said, if you want to put it down, use a flat point. Trapper Dan, what do I think about Jeff Cooper's scout rifle concept? He's absolutely right. Which his first gun that he recommended was a 30-30, a little short 30-30 carbine. He then went to the bolt action and eventually the Steyr made in 308, I believe, or something like that. But as long as it's a caliber, again, and Cooper was a big fan of the flat points like I am. The job of the scout was not long-range sniping. The job of the scout was to do infiltration, reconnaissance, don't be seen, don't be heard. Be a woodsman. Blend in like you're hunting. And when you see the bad guys or whatever, go tell everybody. Having a gun that could reach out to 200 yards to put a target down, not necessarily out, but down. Like he said, and Jeff Cooper talked about, there ain't no medic coming. A gut shot counts. As long as I hit him and put him down, I'll get his stuff tomorrow. And they were right. Cooper were talking about, we expected back in that day, we thought we were going to be fighting the Soviet Union. And movies like Red Dawn and stuff. That was the mindset we had back then. And so Cooper's idea of the scout gun was, I fully believe it. I've read his books, and I haven't owned per se one of those scout rifles. I've built up several guns like that. For several years there, you could get the, it was a Mauser. I want to say it was a Peru Mauser that would come in, and you could get a replacement barrel and screw a 308 barrel. And I believe this was in 7 millimeter. I believe it was 7. I'm probably wrong there. But with just minor changes, you could change the barrel, minor change the bolt face, and you could turn it into a 308. And for a while there, you could get 98 Mausers that Israel had rechambered to 308. 98Ks that were in 308. And we would put a long eye relief scope on it. We'd put a light synthetic stock on it. We'd turn the bolt handles down flat on the bottom, work a timey trigger into it, and make what we call foul weather gun. But it was a scout rifle is what it was. Short, handy, easy, long eye relief. You just looked at the target and brought it up and looked through the tube and you were on target. You know, quick and handy. Exactly, Captain Crunch. Wolverines. You know, Red Dawn, the concept of Red Dawn, the movie Red Dawn, like old Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. At that time, the Soviet Union was trying very hard to get Central and South America to flip over to socialist governments. And we, of course, were having the problems with Nicaragua and El Salvador and etc. And we were actively fighting communist insurgency down there, an undeclared war. Well, Belize, which is, if you look at the Gulf of Mexico, the little toe in the bottom sticking up from South America, that's Belize. It's actually British. And they were having a problem too. And so they took, I believe it was 1,500, I believe they were Mescalero Indians, which is indigenous people down there, that they had recruited for this. And they sent them to Fort Benning. And they trained them to be a ranger battalion, basically. They spent 3 years training them at Fort Benning to be rangers, basically, and sent them back down there as an elite force to fight these. Well, they made a raid and they hit this compound and scored something nobody would have believed. They got a Russian, they got an Afghani, they got Cuban, and I think there was a North Korean. And it was basically some sort of communist summit that was being held when they raided and got it. And the papers that they collected were called the Yucatan Doctrine. And it was talking about how the Soviet Union was planning on getting the Yucatan area and Belize, all of them, to turn communist. And if you look at the beginning of the movie Red Dawn, it talks about it. This falls and then that falls because they wanted to eventually get Mexico. Because once they had Mexico, they'd put 30 divisions sitting on our southern border, of tanks. And then the Soviet plan was to attack Russia. Russia would attack Europe. If America tried to go there, they would invade America. So it would keep us out of them conquering. That was the Yucatan Doctrine of the Soviets, because our oceans protected us. And so that's what the movie Red Dawn is about, is how they had done that and moved in. They never believed that they were going to conquer the United States. In fact, it was Mikhail Gorbachev that he proposed the Yucatan Doctrine in the late 1960s. And it was like 71, 72 whenever this happened, and we caught these guys and found out what it was. So they made that movie in the 80s. But it was because of that. It was the Yucatan Doctrine, how the Soviets were going to invade, lock down America, hit the passes, blow all the bridges on the Mississippi River, hold the United States military here so they could go conquer Europe, because they felt they could conquer Europe in 120 days and then just sue for peace. That was the idea. One of them things that you see in a movie but you didn't know it was real history that led to a fictitious movie. I know, Blackie's stupid. He will. Whoo. Yeah, Powers Booth was a good actor. Exactly, Justin. They World War One, the Germans offered Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California to Mexico if they would join the war on their side. Mexico refused. World War II, Hitler offered Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California to Mexico if they had joined the war on the side of them. And they said no both times. They ain't dumb. You know, I love what their ambassador said. We fought a war with America once. We fought that once. So they took half the country. .133, yeah, those 308 Mausers. Oh yeah, man. When I was a kid coming up, used to go into Joe C. Jones pawn shop, and there was a barrel, like you think of a big whiskey barrel, solid full of World War II and World War One surplus rifles. And they were like $25, $30 a piece. They were Japanese Arisakas. There were Mausers. They were French rifles. They were whatever. And I can remember there was a piece of like tape, masking tape wrapped around it. And then it would say like 8mm Lebel, hard to find ammo, $10, for that gun. And people were getting them and making wall hangings out of them, making lamps out of them. I can remember seeing a original rolling block in 7mm Mauser, Remington rolling block in 7mm Mauser, that the guy took the two screws out and put a big round base up to the two screw holes in the butt plate to make it a vertical lamp stand. Drilled a hole up through the center of the stock all the way up, drilled it through the breech block so they could run the wire all the way up, put the light bulb fixture and all on it, and the trigger was the switch to turn it on and off, and they put a lampshade up on it. I can remember seeing one of those sitting in that pawn shop where somebody had made a lamp out of an original Remington rolling block. Oh, them days. When you read about Val Forget, where he went to Bannerman's, right? I think it was 48, and it was Bannerman's had been the big surplus place. They had bought huge amounts of the Civil War surplus, Spanish-American War surplus, all the way up through World War One surplus, and was in an island up in New York, and it was a concrete medieval castle, literally. They'd been built in the late 1800s, and Bannerman had sold stuff mail order, Well, Val Forget had been asked by EOD to go out there and kind of disarm that place because they had a lot of ordnance just laying around. And I have the book where he's talking about that when they came up, Val Forget had been in EOD in the Navy in World War II. So he said that they put it up to the pier on the boat, and he got off, and standing on either side of the pier were these 12-foot tall torpedoes from the Spanish-American War. And so with the help of a buddy of his, he shinnied up it like a tree to the top of it and stuck a spanner wrench and unscrewed the top and found it was live and primed. He said, we didn't have a word like astronaut back then, but the idea of going to the moon did cross my mind. He said they pulled out the primers and just tipped them off of the pier into the mud. Chain had held them up to these poles. They'd been sitting here in the sun for 25 years. And he went through the entire place disarming old ordnance, artillery shells, etc. And he talked about going into a room, and there was a 4-foot high pile of 1860 Army pistols just piled in the floor. They were piles of Civil War muskets, piles of cavalry saddles, piles of sabers, everywhere. And that's where he got the idea to form Navy Arms because of that. He was the first one ever to get replicas made. He went to Italy and got them to make a 51 Navy because he'd bought up as much as he could for Bannermans and then cleaned them up and sold them. And he needed to make a fresh stock because they were still selling. And so he went to Italy to do it. So I can just imagine somebody having to, can you imagine walking into Bannerman's and getting an original 51 Navy for $3? An original musket from the Civil War, looking like it's brand new for $2.18. I mean, oh, if we could only step through time, oh boy, the collection I would have. Rick, yeah, Walking Tall movie. Up here in Mississippi, as I recall. Oh, what was that? Corinth, Mississippi. Purser, Sheriff John Purser, something like that. Yeah, but you had a lot of that. It wasn't just there. You had some mafia type organized crime stuff that had got into Fort Benning up here. And you literally come out of Fort Benning and you're in Columbus, Georgia, and you cross the river and you're in Phoenix, Alabama. Well, Phoenix City, Alabama had become so corrupt where the mafia, whatever, had just moved in here and got themselves, they just bribed and knew what they had to do to where they'd been elected mayor, chief of police, the police force worked for them, etc., across the board. And it got so bad, the base commander at Fort Benning declared martial law and went in and arrested all of the law enforcement, the head of the fire department, the judge, the city clerks, and everything, and turned it over to federal investigation because it was so bad down here. Buford Purser, that was it. But that was happening a lot here in the South in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, where you'd had organized crime and stuff. That a lot of them were people that got run out of the big cities that had been somebody in Chicago or Atlanta or, Baltimore or wherever, New York, and got run out. And they'd come down to these small towns and set up their own little fiefdom to exploit the economies and stuff like that. And we had a lot of cotton mills down here back in them days. And the cotton mills were abusive in their own way to the workers, etc. So you had a ready population down here that could be exploited, both for places to run narcotics out of, places to run backdoor gambling operations, betting pools, stuff like that. As a boy, I can remember going into I can tell it now, that place ain't there no more. North Main Spur, where all the old men hung out to play checkers, a little bitty old gas station in the middle of nowhere. And if you wanted to put a bet down on Alabama football or something like the Florida game, you went up there and talked to them. And there's part of something bigger that would, you put so much money and you, etc. But they were part of a bigger betting pool. And so it was around back in them days. Edgar, there was a guy I remember seeing an article on him that he was doing that. He was taking an M14 and M1 Garand parts and building it to be a 338 Lapua, where it was a 30-06 action, and he had an in-block clip, but it only held 5 rounds. But there were M14 gas system had been put onto it and things like that, but he was making a 338 Lapua. He was the one that did the 45 Magnum AR. That Stoner told him to his face, you can't do that. The receiver can't do it. And he said, I built 12. It will hold the cartridge. And so the guy was trying, the people were doing write-ups and shooting mags of this guy where he was coming up with these ideas of creating these guns. Excuse me. He was the one that was taking the M1 carbines and making the 45 Magnum, which was a straight wall case. Imagine a 45 ACP, just about double the length. Well, not quite double, but you get the idea. And he was taking M1 Garands and modifying them to a 45. And the wooden stocks couldn't take it. The wooden stocks were splitting. So he would sell you the gun with a choke synthetic stock. And the 45 Magnum cartridge and that little bit of gun was a handful, I'm here to tell you. But in fact, I got to shoot one time. I shot about one mag out of it, and I handed it back to the guy and said, no way. Every time you pull the trigger on that thing, because that gun was so short, so small, and you're crammed up on it like this, you'd punch yourself in the nose with your thumb every time because that gun kicked. It kicked like a 12 gauge 3-inch. That gas system couldn't dampen it down. And but that guy was coming up with 338s, 458s, and a Garand. I mean, it was just ridiculous. He kept coming up with all these big, powerful guns. He loved to tinker. I don't know what happened to him, though, but, you know. Donald might get in butter and egg bets. Yeah. Yep. I can remember when they used to you would take a piece of masking tape and you would write on it the score. So we'll just say Georgia, this date will win by this much. You know, you could either do by how many points they would win or just that they would win. And you'd take that piece of masking tape and there'd be this box sitting up on the manager's desk. And you just tip it over and put it on the inside of the box. Have your initials on it. And when the game was over, the boss would look around and the ones that he'd pull out the tapes that had lost, and whoever was left, he would put and take that and wrap it around the money and drop it in the box. And so that's how they did a little betting pool in businesses where I was at sometimes. It's a masking tape, and that's how that way he didn't know who was betting. You know, just there's their initials. That's about it. But yeah, there was a lot of little backdoor, good-natured fun, you know, buy the beer type deal. Oh, Wayne Hendricks, 219 zipper, yeah. Woo! Yeah, Gray Wolf, the 458, it's really just a modernized 4570. The 458 does, you know, but you can't load the 4570 to it because somebody's got a trapdoor. If you know, a lot of Marlins lever actions could handle that kind of pressure, but the trapdoors couldn't. And so that's one of the reasons I think they created 458s, was because of that. You know, put it in a bolt action gun. But there was, for several years, it was a Mauser that had been in 11 by something. Like, I'm going to get this wrong, guys. But it was like an 11 millimeter by 48. And back in the late 50s, some enterprising gunsmith figured out you could ream it out to 4570. And so I have seen a bolt action Mauser in 4570. You know, but again, it was really meant for the trapdoor power level. It wasn't meant for the modern stuff, but I have seen a bolt action Mauser in 4570. Siamese Mauser. There you go. Australians did it. Australians are very creative people. My hat's off to them. They will find a way. You know, they really do. Over the years, things I have seen them come up with have really amazed me at ways they have modified and improved and increased and whatever. Again, this is what you got. This is what I need. Can I make that do it? And men and people that work with their hands and work with their head, they'll figure it out. Give them enough time. Nothing's impossible given enough time and resources. Yeah, the first Lee is 4570. Yeah. Well, you know, the Lee Enfield was originally the 6mm, and the Navy bought a few of them, and then we didn't want it, and so they took it over to England, and that became the SMLE. So it was always funny to me. It's an American design that went to England. So. Longbow banjo. You're correct. Down under. Or as Benjamin Franklin said, "My, how we have strayed into deep water." Oh. You know, Mike, that's the Bolton. That's the thing. A lot of things used to be, man, they were everywhere, and we kind of expected that. I mean, think about the old Mausers and the old Nambus and the old Arisakas, and man, they were everywhere. Well, I was born 20 years after the war, and they were surplus. They were everywhere. So in the 70s, 80s, 90s, up to about 2000, you know, every time you went to a gun show, there was that guy that had that pile of surplus. But we got to remember that surplus now is 100 years old, a lot of it, especially them Mausers and stuff that were coming out for World War One. Well, they're 100 years old. And now the antique guys want them. And so why would I sell it to you for $50 for a first hunting gun for your kid when I can clean it up real nice and sell it for $500 to somebody trying to build a collection? And so a lot of that surplus is dried up, and I don't know if it's ever going to come back. I really don't, because you look at, you know, the Gulf War and everything else. We're not going to surplus out Mimi 249s. We're not going to surplus out M4s. We're not. They've just in the last couple of years surplused out the 1911s. And what a lot of people don't get was the U.S. military had not bought a new 1911 since 1942. You know, we just had enough stockpile, and they served in all them wars. So now you can go to CMP and you can get a 1911 that's military surplus where they're getting rid of the 1911s. But, you know, I don't see them surplusing out 870s or the Mossberg shotguns. I have heard of some of the M9s being surplused out back about 2010, something like that. Some of the stuff from the early Gulf War stuff, but hadn't seen anything like that pop up. So we may be reaching a point where you're not going to see. Remember, SKSs, all that stuff that came out of the Soviet Union, when they went belly up in the early 90s, that stuff went on the surplus market. And so that's where you saw the Makarovs and the Steyr AUGs and all kinds of stuff that showed up on the surplus market that were semi-automatic and they could do it. Those days are gone. None of the world military is carrying anything now that they could easily surplus out. It's all going to be fully automatic stuff or select fire or something. And so I don't think that the grandkids will ever have a big surplus boom like that ever again. Maybe clothing, but certain, maybe pouches and gear, but we won't see the guns, you know. At the end of World War One, they were selling off airplanes. You know, Lindbergh went and bought a plane. They were just selling them off. Can you fly? You know, he talked about in his book when he was talking about it, said that he had learned just enough to be dangerous. And because he had got somebody to show him how to work the controls. And so he found a place that was selling surplus World War One fighter aircraft and just went in and bought one and taught himself to fly, you know. I can remember reading about how 1956, 57, they were selling Spitfires out of the UK for scrap. And so if you could get there in time and run up and you had money, they'd take the wings off and put it on a truck for you. And you could buy a fighter aircraft that was only 10 years out of, God, what them warbirds are worth now. So I don't know if the future is going to have that kind of surplus for us. And that was one of the big things in woodscraft, bushcraft, etc. People were camping because they had to through the time up until the late 1800s. And then it's really after 1890 that you have this concept of enjoyable camping. You're just going. And that's where people that's working their butt off in cities going to the country, where the rich people could do it anytime, but the poor people only would get the opportunity every so often to be able to go and camp. And so you had the surplus. And so you look at the early Boy Scouts stuff, and it's basically military surplus of the late 1800s. Their canteens and everything else was surplus. It was available. It's where the Army gets rid of this. It was good stuff. You look at a lot of the people that were doing the woodscraft stuff of the early 1900s. And they're using surplus stuff because it was cheap and it was available. You can get it. And today I wear a lot of military surplus because that's what's cheap and available. But a lot of that stuff is turning into recycled and stuff now. So I don't know that the grandkids are going to get that opportunity to have that type of gear, any kind of gear like that, to do it, even if they even want to. Edgar, I can remember in the 90s when SKSs were $60 in Cosmoline. Literally. You could go in there wrapped up in Cosmoline, come out of the Soviet Union, it had all folded apart, and you could buy a virtually brand new SKS for $65, and come home and clean it out. And I did that a lot. I made hunting rifles out of them for friends, etc. AKs were 180. CZ 52 handguns, which were 7.62 by 2.5, were $99 a handgun, and 80 rounds of ammo was $12. A lot of them on the plinking range. And it was armor piercing. It'd go right through body armor. Gray Wolf, exactly. We grew up doing this stuff. This was our playtime. This was fun. Building forts as a kid. That was all kids were going to build forts, man. Today you call them a brush shelter, a debris hut. We called it a fort. We'd get out there and prop stuff up on trees and start piling. We learned how to weave it all together and get the pine straw up on it, get a place up inside of it. Oh, yeah. That's what we did. That was our way of camping and playing and doing stuff. Geico, exactly. The 90s. That was like yesterday, right? Oh, boy. Well, I had talking about that, about somebody was saying how long ago this is ancient. And I went, that came out in like 88 or 89. Yeah, it's ancient, man. It's what, 33, 34 years ago. Well, this person's 20. So to him, that seems that long. I go, okay, yeah, I was in junior high. But yeah, I remember that. And don't you just love when the trends come back? Now it's becoming trendy down here again for the young ladies to have blue jeans with the holes cut out in it and bell bottoms. And I'm looking at that going, we had that in the 60s and 70s. I remember the 60s. I was a little kid, but I was born in the 60s. So I remember the late 60s. and, you know, The Laugh In and all of those TV shows, Get Smart. I remember them, you know, and I remember the things that were going on in those days. And so, well, that was, oh, let's see, 50 years plus years ago. Yeah. Well, it's a half a century. Not that long ago, just half a century. Wayne Hatrich, yeah. The best SKSs were the Russian ones with that pin barrel. Remember? If you could find one that had the Tula mark on it, ooh, that was more money, but it was more accurate. And the one nobody wanted was Model 49 Chinese. It'd go bang, but the bullets might not be in the same zip code with each other. It'd make a noise, but no. And remember the tuna cans that you would have to open up and have, that was I was a manager back then, and I would work in third shift, and I would get off at 7 in the morning, and my good friend Micah and I would jump in the car and run to every little gun shop. And this is when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were going into office, and they were going to do the first big gun ban. And we ran to every gun shop we could find, and back then you got this wooden crate that had two 1,800 rounds of 7.6239, and it was $99 for that case. Okay. I bought as many of them as I could get, and didn't pay the power bill, didn't pay the water bill. I bought ammo and just stacked up in the garage, made a little wall. That thing came in, everybody panicked, went to buying, and 3 weeks later, those SKSs were $65 a piece, and nobody had any ammo. It was just unattainium. And I went back to gun shops and I said, how much? You remember there are two 10s in that case, two 900 round 10s. How much for a 900 round 10? Oh, you can't get it. They're just not available. I said, yeah, but how much would a 10 be? And he said, right now, if I had a 10 of those 900, they're $1 a bullet. That's $900 for a 10. I went, really? He said, yeah. I'd walk out the car and come back with 4 of them and set them up on the counter and said, what am I bid? I paid off the mortgage and I bought her a car. Being at the right place, right time, knowing what's coming, yeah, you can make some money. Before wings, yeah. Spam cans, correct. That's what we call those things. Lynn Lee, hello. Thanks for coming in. That 5x4, 5x3 I remember when those came out. I shied away from them simply because you could get AKs and SKs in 5.56, and that ammo was available. And that 5x4 is basically a 223, but in a 7.6239 type idea. I just kind of stayed away from it because I thought one day it'd be hard to get that ammo. It's hard to get those bullets. It's one thing to cast bullets for a lever action or a bolt action, but we're talking about a semi-automatic. Lead bullets have got to be really hard to run up that feed ramp, handle all that stuff, and grip the brass well enough so if you go to extract, don't leave a bullet sitting in the bore, because the bullet's just a grunt long and it goes in and sticks in the rifling and it kind of bites it, which is what you want it to do, really, is you want it to imprint. And you go to eject the thing, it could pull the bullet and leave the bullet sitting there and pull the case out. And I had a good friend of mine that was hand loading for an SK, and he had a sudden jam, and he looked up and he yanked the bolt back, and this empty case flew out and hit. And he went to chamber, and I grabbed a hold of the top and yanked the bolt back and wait a damn minute. And he said, what? I said, you didn't go bang and a brass came out. Yeah. And so when we pulled it and ran the stick down, here's the bullet and another bullet. So it's double bullet. It just shoved the bullet further down the barrel. If he'd pulled the trigger on that, you know, always be very sensitive whenever you're shooting. And I don't like shooting on a big range with 100 other shooters going on, because you could mistake somebody else's shot for your gun going off. If I shoot and I don't see an impact, I always check a bore. May have a squib load. Life happened. Murphy's on every assembly line. And I have had squib loads where just the primer went and it had enough oomph to push the bullet 2 or 3 inches down the barrel. And that was it. And then you got to carry that range rod, knock that bullet out. I had a collection at one time of various 5.56s and stuff like that that had squibbed and left a bullet, and I would save the bullets. And had a little bit of plaque I made up with them hot glued in place, talking about, the magic bullets. So always be very sensitive to that type of stuff. Lynn, glad you made it. My SKSs are actually better shooters than AKs. Really, they are. In my personal experience, the average SKS will outshoot the average AK out of the box. 2 different mindsets that the Soviets had. The SK was a battle rifle. The AK was an assault rifle. That was a completely different idea. The AK was for the guys riding on the back of the tanks that were the infantry to protect the tanks type deal. The SK was like we think of them when Garand. It was also issued, but it was the mindset they had was like a battle rifle, and it was designed to shoot longer range. And so they got it dialed in a little bit better, even though it's the same ammo. But everybody brags about the reliability of the AK, and they're absolutely correct. Nobody brags about the accuracy of an AK. It's adequate for its job, but it fires a nice cone of fire out there, suppressed fire at 300 meters, whereas the SK was meant to be a shooter. That the guys doing the SK had come from a lot of the city fighting in World War II, where you had to have accuracy at the far end of that street and hit that guy that you could see this much of him peeking up over a piece of debris. You had to hit a football at 200-300 feet because of that. And so the SK was designed to be a battle rifle, whereas the AK was put down a cone of suppressive fire to keep guys away from the tank. Different mindset. Geico, would it cause the barrel to explode? A bullet gets jammed a few inches down and another makes contact. Just curious. Depending on the pressure, yes, it can. Because least path of resistance, true of anything, okay? If the bore is plugged by an extra bullet, let's say, and it detonates, that powder charge is balanced to push the single bullet. You've doubled the weight of the bullet by having 2 there. And that forces the pressure to go up, way on up, because this bullet's supposed to be moving and therefore expanding down the barrel. That lets that gas expand down the barrel. That's what's pushing it out the barrel. Now it's trapped. And that pressure's still going straight up, and it's trapped in this instead of in this. And it can cause parts to break, barrels to split, gas pistons to bust, bolts to break. And this is true. It ain't got to be an SKS or whatever. The famous in the shotgun, the 2012 gauge, which I guess they don't teach anymore, but I used to teach when I was a shooting sports instructor. You can take a pump or semi-automatic 12 gauge. You can put a 12 gauge shell in, put a 20 gauge shell in, put a 12 gauge shell in. Chunk. It loads in the 12 gauge. Next up is the 20. It fires. Chunk lifts up. You ram in the 20. The 20, being smaller in diameter, is thrown down the barrel, and it'll go about that far down the barrel and stop. Thunk. You pull the trigger. Click. You pop it open and look, and there's no shell. And you go chunk, chunk, and you put the 12 gauge in. Now you got a 20 gauge and a 12 gauge stuck behind it. You pull the trigger, the barrel busts like a grenade. It can't take that kind of pressure. The 12-20, that's the reason they color-coded ammo, and they tell you never have two kinds of ammo in your pocket because you can confuse them. I had a friend of mine that was shooting his 270, and it was a very accurate rifle. It was a rifle I'd built for him. And he pulled the trigger, and there was one heck of a bang and a kick. And then he couldn't open the barrel. He couldn't open the bolt. And he called me up and said, something's gone sideways. And so he brought it to me. And I took the action of the barrel out of the stock, locked it up in my vise, put my cheater on it. I got the bolt open. We had to tap the bolt open. And out came the brass. And I looked down the bore, and the bore was clear, you know. And then I picked up the brass and looked at it. It was a 308. 270 is a 30-06 length. The 308 will physically sit in the same position. The case is the same size. So it'll grab it, feed it, and hold it, but it's sitting there. But this is a 308 diameter bullet in a 270 bore. You're shoving a marshmallow down a pipe. And he was just lucky that it didn't let go. It was a testament to how strong that action was that it held it. But it had put so much pressure back that it bound that action up so tight he couldn't lift that bolt by hand. I had to beat it open with a cheater bar. And we checked it a lot before we ever trusted it to shoot again, because you can bust barrels, you can etc. Any kind of blockage in the barrel push the pressure way, way, way up. And it's something that you need to be aware of. That's the reason they tell you, don't carry a gun muzzle down. If you trip and it sticks into the mud, stop everything, clean the gun. If you're going up, like you're coming out of the road and you're going up a high bank, and if you accidentally job the end of the barrel into the bank and get mud into it, and you didn't really even notice you did it. So those are things you got to be very well aware of, that they can cause the gun to go real quick, because that pressure, once initiated, has got to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere. It don't just disappear. And it will find the least path of resistance. And a lot of the early bolt actions had a problem where you would fire and the primer would rupture. That in English means a sharp firing pin would punch the primer and actually poke a hole in it. And that pressure would flow back through the firing pin channel right into your face. And so you'll see these pictures of World War I, etc. guys, they're missing an eye. And that's why. The gas hit them like a blowtorch in the eye, and just the eye's gone. Shrapnel, etc. So they came up with modern ideas where there's a path where it starts to come back, and there's holes in the receiver. There's holes in the bolt to let it bleed that pressure out. Most of your modern hunting guns, if there would be such a rupture, very uncommon today. The technology for the primers has greatly improved than where it was in 1900. But now, if you look at a bolt, there's these two holes in a bolt. And when it's closed, those bolt holes are pointing straight down the magazine, so the pressure would come back and blow it straight in the mag. And you notice that the mag cover on bolt action hunting rifles is usually spring loaded. So you can click it open and click it closed. That's so if you fire and there is such a rupture, it blows down and the magazine blows straight out of the bottom, lets that pressure off. You're sitting there holding it, the pressure would go here, not blowing the wood and the stock into shrapnel into you and everything else. Wayne Hendricks, yeah. It'll fit. But just because it fits, don't mean it works. Hello, Gordon. We're about to wrap up, actually. We just hit 2 hours. So, and I got to get up early. I'm leaving out at 5 a.m. Iraqi veteran 8888 did a thing showing about what all would fit into a 410. and there's like 30 something calibers that would fit into a 410 shotgun. 30-30, 4.54 Casull, 45 Colt, 44 Magnum, 44 Special. Some you had to wrap a little tape around to fit, and etc. And they were trying to blow up a cheap Rossi 410, show how dangerous it was. And they finally had to concoct something to blow it up because it just kept shooting. It was a full choke even, and yet it was handling that kind of pressure. So one of them survival you never thought of, just how many things that fit into a 410 for world go to absolute poo-poo, and you got to have something. I'm not going to recommend that at all. That's a real risky endeavor. But if it's not catching, it's like they found out that you take 50 caliber Mod Deuce ammo and drop it into a 12 gauge and it would chamber and fire. Well, that 50 caliber is here, and here's the bore on either side of it. That it never develops all that pressure because it's just sitting in that tube like a missile launching in a rocket. It just blows out the end of the barrel, and it usually doesn't even damage the gun. But dude, why would you want to risk such a thing? You know, again, Murphy's Law. Murphy's on every assembly line, and something like that, you are just asking for something to go wrong. Well, guys, we've been on for 2 hours and 6 minutes, so that's a good run. It's 9:10 now. I'm going to sign off and thank everybody for all your comments and everything. I really do appreciate that. I hope I did a better job of reading the comments. So Chelsea was saying that I'm ignoring the comments too much, and so I'm trying to do better. Thank you guys, and there'll be video coming out tomorrow for the Silver Wolves on Friday, and then Sunday will be the one on the M65 field jacket as a sleep system. That'll be coming up. I'll be going to my camp out for the next 3 days, and during that time, I will be videotaping. We'll be using the hot tent at this, and so we'll see how that works out. It's supposed to be down into like 30 or 28 or 29, so I'll be pretty good. Thank y'all for Trapper Dan. Good evening. Y'all have a great night, and see you next Thursday night. Till then, safe journeys, everybody.